Okay, so now we're going to talk about the next installment to the Power Platform technology stack or set of technology stacks that kind of make up the Power Platform. And we're going to talk about the Power BI. Now, Power BI to me is probably one of the most valuable technology components of the Power Platform. Not only because you can use it to visualize the data that you create using Power Apps and automating with Power Automate and the batch jobs and all this other stuff that where you're collecting logs and activities, you can visualize all of the data generated from those applications and platforms. But you can also use it to integrate other data within the organization. So this Power BI is not just limited to the data created by the Power Platform. It could be data created from any other enterprise application. So let's kind of look at just from a high level perspective how all of these components in Power BI kind of work together. There's a lot of jargon, there's a lot of terminology here, but I think what we're going to do is kind of use that to really just kind of highlight the purpose of it and the different components of Power BI and what you can and cannot do with it. And I will give you an example of Tesla orders and Tesla clients and how we kind of fuse that data together and make some visual components with that. So Power BI is going to be composed of three main components, right? And there's exact terminology for that. I don't have that for you. And to be transparent, I haven't been able to really gather a ton of experience with Power BI. So what I'm showing you today is going to be for me just really kind of playing with it within my labs, as well as I'm like you, I'm a student of the game, and I went out and consumed a lot of video to prep for this video. And this is my understanding on how this is put together. So the first component is going to be the data gathering. And when we say the data gathering, this could be data that sorts from many different areas within the organization. Obviously, you can have data coming from a SharePoint list. You can also have data coming from SQL, which is probably one of the most popular. And this could be SQL on-prem as well as Azure SQL. You can also have data sourced from, let's just say, Salesforce or SAP or Workday or some other enterprise source. We're going to call this enterprise application data. Now, these data sources, right, can be siloed. And this is the beauty of Power BI. So you can take silo data, just so imagine, and here's another popular one. Let's just call this Microsoft Excel, right? So you can have all these siloed pieces of data managed by best of breed for their respective areas, right? And you can use Power BI to gather that data and create relationships within that data using Power Pivot, as well as calculations and measurements in Power Pivot and DAX, the syntax form. The DAX is the formula syntax to allow you to kind of manipulate the data, like the average or the sum or any other calculations you want to do against this data, and produce the actual data set or the results to actually display it. Now, that's the power. So this data gathering will allow you to say, okay, I'm going to pull enterprise application data or SAP data into this, and I'm going to build that. And also, I need to get some ordering information from Excel. And also, I need to do my client relationship ticketing system by my relationship managers that interact with this client. So I need to take all this data from these three different sources and fuse them together or relate them together in the next step, which is going to be the Power Pivot. And this is where all your relationships happen, right? And this is where you identify it. So imagine if from Excel, if we're doing order data, I may have a customer order ID, and that's going to map to their ID in CRM. So that ID will match to that customer record, and then you can generate the relationships that are available in Salesforce or the hierarchy of the data that's available in Salesforce. So the client ID is going to be the particular client. but the person who placed the order would be the individual or the contact at that client location. And then you get all the relationships related to that particular contact. And with that contact that placed the order, I would have their email address, and that's what my relationship manager would have. So they may have a history or log with that client, and that, through a Power App that we created, and we store that data in the SharePoint list. So this is the relationship data. Now I have the client ID related to the contact record in Salesforce, which also has the contact email, and that relate to the relationship management data that's stored in SharePoint. And from that, I can generate this beautiful record that has components or attributes from all three of these different sources that operate independent, but I have primary keys that's needed to relate that. And I define that relationship in Power Pivot. Now, once I have that, now I'm going to do the next step in Power BI, which is going to be the visualization, right? And then in this visualization step, this is where I make things pretty, right? And this is the power of Power BI, because now I can do a nice chart or a grid that has all this data related, and now I can do a lot of filtering and manipulation on the data as far as the contact, and then look at things at the customer level, look at things from the relationship, the client relationship level. Is this client active or whatever case? So you have so many data points or stories you can tell with this data, and then the visualization components allow you to piece that together. Okay, so how does this look? Let's kind of walk through the process of putting all this together. You can do this pretty quickly. Now, I will say, I'm going to say that for last, like how these tools kind of relate, because what I'm doing, what you're looking at here, I brought up the Power BI desktop. And the Power BI desktop, from a report developer or a report designer, this is probably the best tool to do that. You can also build reports using the browser only without the thick client, but it seems like the thick client has way more functionality. So, and this is out of all the technologies, this is probably the one technology, actually there's two, where you can actually download an application locally to your PC or Mac, right? So Power BI is one of them, and then Power Automate Desktop would be another. And those are the two scenarios I know of so far where you actually have a thick client. I mean, outside of Microsoft Teams and that. So with that, you get a lot of power. So the first thing you want to do in your desktop is to get the data. And this is that data gathering step. And what I have here, I'm going to keep it simple. I'm not going to connect to an SAP or Salesforce and all the other stuff, because I don't have any of those running in the lab. I'm going to pull in these Tesla orders, right? And then we can do a snapshot of what this looks like. And the fact that you can do this with Excel is very powerful, because most enterprise applications most applications usually have like an export function. In Excel or CSV or XML or JSON, whatever, are going to be some of the most popular. Now, if you look at this order, this sample order Excel file, you have the order number, the date, the state to which, I guess the location, the dealership location that sold it, which vehicle in the Tesla family. So these are the different models. And then here's the key, the customer ID. So now when I look at the customer record, it's going to be, its primary key is going to be this ID, and this is going to be the thing that I hinge this data on and restart to relate it in a meaningful way. And then also in the year, that's the year of the vehicle that was loaded. Now, the next thing I want to do is to go ahead and load that. So that's going to load that into, I believe this is called the data set, and this is going to be in Power Pivot. And again, there's a lot of terminology, and forgive me, I may not be using the right term for the right area. Okay, so now that I have this data over here to the right, this is priming me to go ahead and start to build my dashboard. But before I do that, I want to go back to File and get more data. So now I want to get the customer information. and that's going to load that in. And what you see here, these are, if you have multiple sheets within this Excel, all your different sheets in that Excel workbook will display here. Because I only have one sheet in the same workbook, it looks like a one-to-one, but that's why you see that sub area there. Now, again, as you can see, I got my customer information, and this is going to be the details I expect at a pretty much a contact or a client at a client site. And this is going to be the ID that's going to mirror or be mapped to that order Excel. All right. So in this one, I actually clicked on transform. And what this is going to allow me to do is now to create a relationship between these disparate silos of data. So the first thing I would like to do is to name these and give these a meaningful name. So as I'm building this out, it makes sense. So I'm gonna just call the first set orders, and then I'm gonna call the second set customers, right? And now what I would do, and this is the same Power Query capability that you have in Excel, which is really refreshing, especially with working with this feature in Excel and coming into Power BI. The fact that I started to feel very, very comfortable in this screen, and I kind of had a sense of what capabilities it had. So what I like to do is to create a query or a merge query, or from a database perspective, like a view, right? So you're going to pull from these different quote unquote tables and create a view that's going to have the needed columns and relationships that you expect. And I'm going to do this as a new versus updating an existing. So I'm going to do this as a new query. And basically what it's doing is allow me to select the data sources that I have here, or I don't know why they call them queries, but I guess the queries that I have here, and now I can define the relationship. So basically I'm gonna take the customer ID from the orders list, and then the ID from the customers list, and then I want to do a join. So I'm gonna say inner join only, because I only want the customers who actually have an order, a related order in this order list. And that's what I'm going to create my dashboard off of. So once I do that, I get this new query or data set, and I'm gonna call this customer orders, right? And now that I have these two related, I can now go ahead, close and apply, and pretty much have all of that data available to me over here on the right hand side. Now, I don't necessarily need this, so I'm gonna hide these. I want to delete it, but I don't know what happened to my customer order. So I don't want to muddy up the waters and have multiple fields available to me. So I would rather just remove it and just deal with this customer order. So this is going to give me everything I need. Now I did forget one key step. So let me go back here. How do I go back? Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna go to, let's try edit query. Now the one step I did forget to do, once I merged orders and customers with that inner join, all of my customer information is just collapsed into this one column. And if you click on the header, this icon here, this allows you to say, okay, you have this inner join, which fields from this customer table do you want to make available? And actually I want all of them except for the one that I joined on. So I don't need the ID because I already have the ID in this customer ID column, which came along with the orders query, right? So once I do that and select, magic happens. So now everything that was on that customers list is now available to me in this customer orders list. And now I can close and apply, right? And that didn't dawn on me until I saw how short that list was of the different fields. Okay, so now that I have that available to me, the other thing that you probably want to take a closer look at is that you have these you see a special icon, the auto sum or the sum icon in front of these three fields. This is Power BI trying to be smart and say, I identify a column that has a bunch of numbers in it. You probably want to sum these up. Well, these are not calculated type values, right? This is an ID, this is a zip code, and that's the year of the vehicle. So I actually want these values and not the summation of these values. So what you do is you select that column and you select the column tools tab, and then in summarization, go ahead and turn that off. and then that icon goes away. So I'm going to do that for the rest of these. Okay, so once that's done, I can now start to create some meaningful data visualizations. So the first thing I'm going to go after, because I always think this is cool, is the map component. And I don't know if these are called visualizations or components or whatever, but I'm going to reference them as components just in the whole Power Apps terminology. So if I click on this map icon, as you can see, that drops that widget onto my dashboard here that I can build. In this report builder, I mean, this is not a Power BI tutorial, but what I really want to do is just kind of show you, based on what we discussed in the whiteboard, how you kind of get from that whole concept to the actual techniques and tactics of building something, making something meaningful. And then once you have this report, what you can and cannot do to it. There are a ton of Power BI videos that really go into a lot of detail in each one of these components, especially the data gathering piece, because that's the most important piece. So I urge you to, continue on your journey to really do deep dives in those areas if you're looking for more detailed instruction on Power BI. Okay, I see all that to say. Let's go ahead and get started. Now that I have this visualization, basically what it's looking for, it says, which one of your fields do you want to visualize in here? And I'm going to, with this component highlighted, just check the state field. And as soon as I do that, it builds a map, which is fantastic. And this is just like any other map component that you're used to. And it's going to show you which states have that data, right? Now, the other thing I want to do is visualize some of the other relationships. So I took in the client information and I took in the order information. So now what I would like to do is show the customer's name up against the vehicle that they ordered. And to do that, you will want to use this widget here called the matrix. And the matrix is pretty interesting. Oops. And that's the thing. I keep forgetting to uncheck the selected component. So let me go into the white space, select this guy, and it's really probably good practice to make sure all these are even and aligned and all this fun stuff. And now with this component selected, I can then start to select the items that I want to display, so the fields I want to display. So in this case, it's going to be, okay, so I wanted to show customer name, and then the model vehicle that they ordered. This is actually not giving me what I was looking for. Oh, so what I want to do is add up the number of models in the orders table. So in order to do that, and this is where the real power comes in, because you're going to have like all this data listed, but in this case, I probably want to see, okay, how many, let me put the first and last name here. Yeah, so I have to decide if I want to. This is where display name probably would be more useful. Because if I try to add more names, it's thinking that it's like a hierarchy relationship, and you have to get this expand and contract. So, I mean, this is where you start to learn, like, how do you need to prep and get your data to look a certain way, so that way when it comes to visualizing that data, it's really, really straightforward. So it doesn't seem like I can concatenate these fields here. I probably have to do that in that Power Queries transformation section. So for now, I'm gonna just take the first name, and then as far as values, I have the actual value of the model. In this case, if they have multiple models, it's just gonna grab the first one. And I really want to count, right? So I want to see how many vehicles or how many models or Teslas did Abby order, right? And to do that, I really need to start adding up the vehicles. And that's where this other new feature called measure comes into play. Now, once you select a measure, it becomes like a column. And this is very like a calculated column, right, in SharePoint. So this becomes like your calculated column. And basically what I want to do is say total, let's just say total cars. And then I'm going to do a summation of, and I don't know if I do, I think it's count A. And again, this is where you really have to understand the different methods. But I want to say this is count A. And what this is showing me is all the fields and I got all three data sets here, and I'm really only focused on customer order. So all the fields in customer order that's already, joined, and I'm gonna just say count the models. So count A, and that's going to be the number of models. It's probably just a count. I don't know. I might have to play around with this. So I'm going to say count, and then store that into a column called total cars. Again, just like a calculate field, right? So once I have that, let me play around with this. Let me put total cars here, and basically what this is doing is saying, okay, for Abby, Abby ordered 4 Cybertrucks. These people are balling. Who has 4 Cybertrucks? 2 Model 3s, 2 Model S, and so on and so forth, right? So at the client level, this really doesn't make sense, right? Because this goes on for days, and I mean, unless you're doing like a preferred client where you're doing something with your top tier clients. These could be like dealerships, whatever. I mean, with these numbers, these numbers are ridiculous. But anyway, so let's do something like show me the number of models per model for each state versus each customer, right? So instead of the row, instead of using customer, now what I can do is select the state of the customer, right? And this is going to give me a much more interesting data set or visualization on this. Is okay, for Connecticut, they have a total of 127 vehicles ordered. Their population ordered 127 vehicles, and now you get the breakdown on where that 127 mean. I think that's more meaningful, right? And then once you're in here, you can also, redesign these. Like you probably want to stretch these out to where you can see the numbers and so on and so forth. So you have full control of that. And I'm a very, very huge component of balancing the page. So, if this widget is going to populate this quad, I want that to be the same width as this guy here, right? Now, here's the other thing about Power BI. If you inside of Georgia, as an example, and you select it, notice what happens to the map. So these guys are all connected because they're all feeding from the same data source. And regardless of what component you're on, like if I select, okay, let me undo that filter. And let's say, for example, I'm in the map and I want to see how Ohio is doing. And I click on the blue dot that represents Ohio, and notice what happens to your matrix. Your matrix filters on Ohio, right? So very, very cool stuff. And this is the type of thing. So this type of filtering and sorting, and I think some of these like columns you can sort in, I thought you can sort. Maybe not. Yeah, I thought you can probably like sort the columns or something. But, so some of these have features and capabilities to where you can sort by the column. You can filter by the model and so on and so forth. And everything, all that filtering capability is available to the user of this report. And that's what makes it powerful. So now you don't necessarily have to design this for each and every use case. So, okay, here's the report for Delaware. Here's the report for Hawaii. Here's the report for Indiana. You put all these components together, and then you allow the user to drill in and manipulate the data to tell the story that they're trying to tell, or get more information for the decision that they're trying to make, right? Okay, so now that we have that, let's build another quad using the matrix that shows a different view. Okay, so this one, again, I want to start by state, but now I want to look at the year of the cars sold for that state. So I can do something like this. So here I have, again, very similar to here. So this quad shows me which models were sold per state. And now I want to see the year of the model or the year of the vehicle sold in that state. And what this probably tells me is how aggressive is the population or the client base in a particular state. Or, say, for example, let's say California, which makes perfect sense. They may be huge evangelists for energy cars, and they're going to be looking for the latest and greatest. So, we had a breakout year for the 2022 models, and we also had a breakout year for the 2023. And now I can manipulate this and say, okay, which state is ordering the latest and greatest, the most the latest vehicle, right? And you can see Texas was very strong for the 22 models and gaining momentum for the 2023 models, right? So, and again, this probably can help you with anticipating planning. This could probably help you with anticipating transportation or logistics and getting models. Okay, I need to, maybe contract a trucking company or a transportation company to send a lot of our vehicles to Texas. Or I don't know if they would use this to determine where a plant should be created, so on and so forth. So again, this is how you can get very, very creative on how you create these dashboards and what type of data points you want to make available in the various quads and go from there. And you're not limited to this one page, right? So you can see here at the bottom where you can build a multi-page dashboard or a multi-page report and allow your users to, this just gives you more room to build more data points for the user. Now, the biggest question is going to be, how do I get this available to my user? So I'm building all of this in Power BI desktop. How do I get this up to like a SharePoint and things along those lines? So the first thing you want to do is just save what you built so far, and it creates this PBIX file type. And I'm gonna just grab one of these and say Tesla Order V2, right? So now that that's saved, now you can go to the file menu and then select Publish. I'm logged into, that's one of the steps I completed, but I didn't show you. But I logged into Power BI Desktop with my Office 365 credentials. And that way, when I say publish, it knows which tenant to push this up to, especially if you like me and you have like playground tenants and you have your organization tenants and so on and so forth. Being able to toggle between the various tenants is something that you should be familiar with and you're doing responsibly, meaning that you're not building something and accidentally pushing it to the wrong tenant. Now, this is going to be in my playground. Everyone gets a workspace as a report designer or developer. And really, that's just like your folder where all your Power BI reports will go. So you have, if there's something that you created, you can pretty much guarantee that it's going to be in your workspace and then you have access to it. Okay, so now that it says that this is published, I can now click on this link that says open in Power BI. And basically, this is going to take me to Power BI in the cloud. And it's going to have the same information that what we saw before. And now I probably 9 times out of 10 want to publish this report and display it on SharePoint so that way I can get other people to take a look at it. So then I would just say embed report, SharePoint online. It's going to give me this URL and I click copy. And then now I can go to one of my SharePoint pages. That's an old report. So let's just build this from scratch together. So I click on new page, click the blank template. I hate this big header. So I usually go with like a plain header that has a smaller footprint. And then I would just say sample Tesla orders and create a section here. And what I'm looking for is the Power BI web part. Go ahead and select that. And then from that web part, click the edit component, paste in that URL, and then that's going to embed the report. And the most exciting thing, I guess it's pretty impressive, right? That the way that I built it is the way that it displays here. So now I can get rid of this edit component. The edit panel, go ahead and publish this, and now I kind of have this report available to me. Now, I don't know, the other thing that we have to do, and we didn't talk through this, is the permissions on this report. So I embedded that report in SharePoint, but then when I go to share, okay, so I want to make sure that other people can view this report, right? So instead of using share, which is where it's just like a share link in your document, you actually probably want to, especially with the embed scenario, is to manage permissions. And then once you get managed permissions, you can go to direct access and then you can add users that you want to use or be able to see this. And it looks like you can also add so this is my human resources, which I think is actually is a Microsoft team. Let's see. I think I have a marketing. See, these may actually be security groups. right? So now I can grant everyone in marketing access. And notice the permission levels, right? So me as the report owner, I have read, write, and reshare, where maybe the marketing team, I want you to be able to view it, but I don't want you to share it with other people. So maybe I can remove the reshare option and only give you view access, right? So now I can share this link to my SharePoint page with Madison or anyone else in the marketing team, and then they can go to this page and then view it and then manipulate this data and so on and so forth, right? So that's how you build a report using Power BI desktop, and then, put the different visual components of it and then publish it. And as you can see, it's really, really straightforward. This example may be trivial, right? I only took 2 data sets, built a relationship on them, create a single set with that relationship, and then start building my visualization around that. The other thing that you can do, and this is relatively new, I would say brand new, but relatively new, that if you take a list, you can actually generate a Power BI this way. So I'm going to take, say console log. And maybe I want to do a visualization off of this. I have all my data. This really speaks to that Power Apps, Power Automate story, right? So you have all this data and you dump it into a SharePoint list. So now you have a list full of data, and you probably want to build some visuals around it. So you go into integrate and go down to the Power BI and then say visualize this list. And basically, because that list is the single data source, it's going to generate all of this for you. And now you have your different filters that you can bring in, and then this is a way that you can generate different charts. And as you can see, it starts you out with maybe a basic chart that may or may not make sense, but this is a super duper easy way for you to come in here and really start to generate visuals around the data that you're already collecting, and then to define on the x-axis what field you want to grab, and then on the y-axis what field you want to grab, and so on and so forth, right? Now, and it really just drives it forward, because now you can go through the same deal where you can publish this to this list, and let's just give it a name. Let's just say sample chart Deshaun. Go ahead and publish that, and this is going to actually write with the list. So now you don't have to worry about publishing this to like a SharePoint page and creating a SharePoint page and all this other good stuff. Now, as your users who have access to this list, if I click refresh, they're already interacting with the data and interacting with the various views that you can create against the SharePoint list and the data. And now they're going to integrate Power BI and then use your saved chart. They click on that link, and obviously they can bookmark this or whatever you want to do. And now they have a visualization on this dashboard. And the cool thing about this is that as your list is updated or grows or things are removed or whatever the case may be, this is going to monitor that. I want to say real time. Now, this is the piece I don't know. Like the refresh story in Power BI, you want to research that, because it gets kind of interesting, right? Because if you're using one level of licensing with Power BI, you get so many refreshes within the 24-hour period. A higher level, you get more refreshes. So this, though, I assume, because we're not really kind of using Power BI in its abstract way, this is really a prescribed way of taking the SharePoint list and going to come to this point. I just assume this is real time or very close to real time. This may or may not be the case. We probably have to research to confirm that. But my gut feel says this is going to be real time. So for executives or managers or admins or whatever that want to monitor activity on a particular list, this is actually fantastic, right? And then you can do reports and all this other fun stuff with that. So that's going to be Power BI. Super duper important, right? Because especially when this period in time that where we are, where digital transformation, everything is automated, everything is digitalized, we're getting rid of paper, we're getting rid of manual steps, so on and so forth. This is the measure piece, right? These are the components needed for managers, executives, team members, even yourself, to make a data driven decision. And I think that's key. And those who are, wanting to take a certain initiative and you have the data to back it up, the data speaks for itself. Of course you can interpret it, you can tell different stories with it, but the data is the data. How you spin it is really up to you, but the data is the data, right? So I think that's why this is super duper important. SharePoint lists are great. SharePoint views are super awesome, but I think the Power BI really put things in the visual form to where you can really start to tell a story with the data. All right, so that's it for this particular item. I think the next one we're going to cover is going to be the Power Virtual Agent, which is another one that I'm not super experienced in, but I will be researching and tinkering around with it in the lab, and share a video on my experience and what I think about it. But until then, I'll see you tomorrow.